Welcome back, everybody. 2023 saw a huge wave of strikes across a variety of industries in the U.S., and it led to some key gains for workers and witnessed some historic highlights along the way. Here's Dan Williams.
This became a common sight in 2023. From healthcare workers to Starbucks employees. But it was the strike by the United Auto Workers against the so-called Big Three Detroit automakers, Ford, General Motors and Stellantis, that dominated coverage.
Tonight, for the first time in our history, we will strike all three of the Big Three at once.
So this strike against the Detroit Three automakers was historic, and it didn't strike every plant. It took a really unique strategy with this sort of rolling, expanding strike where they would hit certain targets, wait a couple weeks, expand that strike to a few more targets, and really keep the automakers on their toes so they didn't know what to expect.
This was an auto strike like no other, and it was here in Belleville, Michigan, where a small piece of history was made, as Joe Biden became the first sitting US president to join a picket line, an unparalleled show of support for organized labor. After arriving, Biden grabbed a bullhorn.
You deserve the significant raise you need and other benefits.
Let's get it!
Let's get back what we lost, okay?
Yeah.
It was a huge, absolutely huge moment when President Joe Biden came to visit the UAW on the picket line, and it only happened because of the pressure and because of the aggressiveness of Shawn Fain and the UAW leaders.
In late October, tentative agreements were reached with all three automakers. The UAW won big, emerging with lucrative contracts that locked in raises in wages of at least 25%, as well as boosting retirement contributions and other benefits.
What they were able to do, again, was show that if you're aggressive, if you're organized, and if you know what you want going into it, you can achieve significant gains. Labor is having a moment right now, and that's only going to continue because of what the UAW achieved.
According to data from Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations, there are almost double the number of strikes in 2023 compared to 2021. They included a strike by more than 75,000 healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente, the country's largest non-profit healthcare organization. That too led to significant pay increases, a unique year of strike action, and some major gains for workers. Dan Williams, CGTN, Belleville, Michigan.
Meanwhile, two Japanese automakers have having a rough start to their start of the year with potential recalls. Toyota is recalling over 1 million vehicles, Lexus as well, because of the airbags that may not deploy properly. Meanwhile, Toyota's small car unit Daihatsu is suspending shipments of its vehicles in and out of Japan after they discovered improper testing on 64 different models. Honda's American arm is recalling 2.5 million vehicles in the U.S. after they detected a fuel pump defect that could increase the risk of engine failure or stalling while driving. Now, as Dan mentioned earlier, the U.S. auto industry was hit hard by strikes last year, but the industry as a whole has bounced back. Third quarter auto sales in the U.S. were 16% higher than a year ago, and the stars of this year's international auto shows were electric vehicles. Heading into next year, Cox Automotive predicts new vehicle inventory and supply chains will stabilize. Forecasters expect new car sales in the U.S. to grow slightly next year, up between 1% and 4%. And for more on the auto industry this year, I spoke with Lauren Fix. She's a automotive expert and editor-in-chief of Car Coach Reports.
The manufacturers have stepped up to the plate and brought us some pretty cool product with some great technology. So the manufacturers have held up their end of the deal. Unfortunately, it looks like, at least here in the US, and I know in other countries, the infrastructure is just not there for charging. And it's very frustrating for consumers who bought these really amazing cars on a global basis, and then they can't get the charging, or they can't charge at home, or charging isn't what they expected, and the downtime is really frustrating, as well as the additional fees for tires, which no one talks about, and of course the insurance rates, which are much higher.
One of the issues was supply chain concerns going into the year. High prices for consumers were another issue. And part of that was partly inflation, but you saw markups from manufacturers, dealers, insurance, and everything that goes into a vehicle purchase. And in the last couple of months, towards the end of the year, we saw maybe a slight leveling off of some of these increases. Are consumers going to have a better 2024 when it comes to pricing power?
Yeah, they have a little bit more power, especially in the new and used car market. We had a chip shortage coming into 2023. That chip shortage was pretty serious, and it impacted literally every brand. They couldn't get the cool product to market. And I say cool product, like the big screens that we all want for center screens, some of this new safety features, heated seats. A lot of that manufacturers had pulled back the chips. And if those people did purchase those vehicles, you can go back to the dealer and they'll put in what they can. But it's important to note that what happened was the no you new cars, so used car market got strong. Now it's softened a bit. And I think it might actually get stronger again with more increased prices in the used car market for 2024. And the reason I say that is we've got a lot of electric vehicles on the marketplace. And as more of them become mandated in, and here in the US, we've also got kill switches coming in on 2026 models and all this data collection that consumers are very upset about, and all this AI that's now put itself into cars, consumers are starting to think, you know what, maybe I'll just buy a used car. And of course, we've got high interest rates, and a lot of consumers are upside down on their loans. And most upside down means you owe more on it than it's worth. And on average across the US, it's about $6,000 that you're upside down, that you owe more on the vehicle than it's worth. So maybe a used car might not be a bad idea, which means used car prices go back up.
There's an oversupply of electric vehicles. Almost every major brand has an electric vehicle or has an electric vehicle option. Consumers have multiples in terms of options when it comes to electric vehicles. Why haven't we seen car makers be profitable on these? In fact, now they're not profitable, they're still losing money.
Right. Well, they never were profitable, not even Tesla. Tesla makes his money, and he's still the number one electric vehicle car manufacturer. He owns 60% of the marketplace. So it's really hard to beat the leader that's that far ahead. So while other car manufacturers are producing product, they're still getting their batteries out of China. So you have to keep that in mind. So the cost of bringing those in, importing them in, assembling them in US plants in order to make that $7,500 tax credit is really hurting car manufacturers, even if the batteries were built here in the US. So what Elon Musk does is he sells those carbon credits to car manufacturers that don't make electric vehicles, like Subaru, who's coming on the market with them, or Mazda, who makes very small amount but looking to make more. Those car manufacturers buy the carbon credit, so they're not fined by the EPA.
You've seen Ford and GM both announce of significant cutbacks in their foray into electric vehicles. That doesn't bode well for 2024. For consumers, it's probably good because you can probably get a deal, I'm sure, on electric vehicles. But why haven't they adopted it the same way that consumers adopted Tesla, say, 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Well, you got to remember now we've got the super saturation rate of those that are high tech people, people that are early adopters, people that really wanted them. They've got what they wanted, and there's a lot of great choices, and they're renewing leases or getting different brands. But when you're talking about the bulk of America, if you were to take America and slice it the long way, you'd see the upper half of the country gets really cold temperatures, and there's nothing worse than getting in your vehicle in the morning and starting it and finding that you lose a third of your battery life. Now, if you're in really warm areas in like the middle of the desert, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas and Florida, where it gets really warm, it doesn't make sense there either.
Do we as consumers or manufacturers have to look forward to in 2024? What's the latest and greatest that's coming out?
There's a lot of great product coming out. Hyundai, which has really been, Hyundai and Kia have really been kicking butt. And the reason they have is because they have 800-volt architecture, which is faster charging than some of the other brands, of the mainstream brands. They've got the new Santa Fe coming out, which I've reviewed and driven. It's pretty impressive. We've driven some performance vehicles, including the Kia EV6 GT. And so there's a lot of neat product out there. And then if you just say, I just need something to get me from point A to point B, and I'm looking at electric, you can buy a Kona EV, which is made by Hyundai, just because I happen to be on that product line. Or you could just say, I want a gasoline-powered vehicles, and there's a ton of them. You can still buy a Nissan Versa for $20,000. And so people are still looking at the price of gasoline being low, as long as it remains low, which it probably will because it's a presidential year. You're going to watch a lot of interesting things happening.